Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise Business and the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. I'm Ron Baker, along with my good friend and VeraSage Institute colleague Ed Kless. On today's show, folks, we're talking about pricing Spineometers, our second interview with Tim Smith. Tim, welcome back to the Soul of Enterprise.
Ron, it's always a pleasure to talk to you and Ed. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you were on last time, November 4th, 2016. So, some stuff has happened since then. I just remember hanging out in Sao Paulo with you, Tim, at a PPS conference down there. That was a beautiful city to hang out in. Go to hit some bars and sit around and talk about all these different things. But let me ask you this, because I've always found this fascinating about you. I know I asked you when you were first on, but I'm going to ask it again. You've got a PhD in physical chemistry. How'd you end up in pricing?
It's not that hard. First of all, consider that about 25% of the PhDs in physics continue in the academic area. The rest of them, 25% go off to industry. A lot of them become entrepreneurs. Another quarter goes off to consulting. Another quarter goes off to finance and does that investment banking with option swaps, futures, and other financial derivatives. Well, I chose the enterprise approach. And I had studied option swaps, futures, and other financial derivatives. Interesting field. But I thought that kind of rigor was missing from the pricing field, where I'm just pricing, offerings, not option. And I thought we needed to bring some of that rigor, that mathematical rigor, to the field. Now, I'll note to you that the Black-Scholes equation was written by a physicist. So it's not unusual for physicists to jump into the math of business, and that's what I did.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, I've read some physicist books on business, and they do bring a great perspective to it. It's really neat. I love that multidisciplinary approach. Tim, you're heavily involved with the Professional Pricing Society. You've taught for them for years. I think you're probably on their board and an academic advisor to them. Give us the lay of the land of the pricing profession. I mean, you've watched it grown. I've watched it grown from just 2003 when I got involved with PPS. Where's it stand today?
It's still fragmented, and it's still, the definition is not settled upon it. One of the things I've been doing with the course of my career is just trying to define what it means to be a pricing professional. What questions do you answer, and what value is it to have you on the team? That's kind of a basic question what I've been asking here. When I wrote Pricing Strategy, the textbook, I was trying to lay out the land of the field. What is it we do? Okay. And technically, great book, lots of math in it, very useful. Then I realized that the CEOs are never going to read it because they don't want to bother with math. So I tried to write Pricing Done Right to explain to a CEO how you would actually use a pricing person in your company and what that pricing professional can do for you if you hire them. That did okay. I've gotten lots of praise on these books. That's fine, but it didn't change the field well enough. And so then I started just saying, well, fine, I'll just write what I'm calling a pricing spinometer. I'll just tell that company, hey, you should be doing this. These are the things that you're not doing. Or, hey, you are doing these things, and these are great things. You could consider a few other things, but you're doing a good job. And just giving a 1 to 5 rating on, are you capable of doing pricing right or not?
I love that. You put those out in your newsletter, and they're just great. 1 to 5 scale, because Ed and I like to refer to the pricers as your spine, a company's spine. They're there to guard your pricing integrity. Can you walk us through your criteria of how you come to that 1 to 5 rating, and what specific things do you look at?
Okay, so I start out by trying to figure out what the company does, and is it something that I have any knowledge about? Okay. So I've decided I'm not rating finance companies because most of their business is, set on interest rates and stuff like that. Don't worry about them. And if it's a public utility, not worried about those either. Okay, because that's regulated, etc. So I'm looking at industrials and CPG and such. And then I'm looking at the things that pricing can do. So in pricing strategy, the textbook, I laid out 3 core areas the pricing should be engaged. Did I set the price in the first place? List price, you can think of it that way. Okay, did that. How am I managing discounts and rebates? How am I managing promotions? Is that underneath a mathematical, rigorous framework, or am I just making that stuff up and letting people do whatever they want to? Then I look at all the things we can do there in terms of giving salespeople price guidance, guardrails, areas to fight in, giving salespeople profit-based incentives instead of revenue-based incentives, so they're actually getting money, things of that nature. And then I go to the third area. What are the structures you can be using? There's 10 fundamentally different price structures that you can choose from. And some companies almost have to use them all, honestly. I looked at one the other day, Expeditors International, and I thought, there's a lot you can do. So those 10, just briefly rattle them out. There's unit-based pricing, there's 2-part tariffs, there's tying arrangements, there's good, better, best versioning, there's bundling, price bundling, which is different from volume bundling. And then we get into subscriptions, yield management used by airlines, cruise ships, Taylor Swift, Maersk. Then you got index-based pricing. And I did not include that in my book, and I wish I had, but anyway, index-based pricing used by chemicals, plastics, manufacturers, anybody who has to sell something on a long-term contract and doesn't know the input cost, and that is a significant portion of the price, should consider index-based pricing, okay? Waste management does index-based pricing. Republic Services does index-based pricing. HB Hunt, a trucking company, uses indices for pricing. Then you get something that I'll call truly dynamic pricing of the form of like Uber, where I'm just trying to match supply and demand and just move stuff around, okay? Doesn't work, by the way, if you look at the profitability of those companies. I mean, it can, but it hasn't worked. And then finally, there is a price structure that does work in certain situations. Pay what you want. Panera Bakery did okay with that in the rich neighborhood of St. Louis. They've also tested that out in the UK and in Germany at some restaurants. It worked out. It didn't work out at the movie theater. It worked out at basically high street restaurants where people are getting lunch.
And you also
so those are 10 different price structures, right?
Yep.
And think about it. How many people actually know when do I use which? How do they different work? And how do I actually deploy them? That's the job of a pricing professional. I got one other area to go into before I let you go, Ron.
Okay. Go ahead.
When you're looking at an industry going through high changes, you need more pricing people. You need more pricing professionals and stuff because you have to react. In the US, we've tended to go towards annual-based price increases and annual reviews. That makes no sense when you're talking about 40%, 400% inflation down in Argentina or 100% inflation in Turkey a couple of years ago. I mean, it just doesn't work. When your industry's changing, when your economic environment's changing, you need more economists, applied economists, pricing professionals to help guide the company to say, look, we didn't sell that volume because of an economic external condition. And changing your price is not going to make you get that volume back. So it's like trying to help the team respond correctly to what's my value to the market, what's my value to that customer today, how do I shift the way they think, and how do I extract it? Sorry, that was a monologue.
No, fantastic. I loved it. You also talk about how many pricers they have, and I'm just wondering, you must have benchmarks for a size company, how many should be in their pricing. Do you have some heuristics or rules of thumb around that?
So after I look through everything that they're saying, you're right, getting me back on track. Thank you. I look at everything they're doing in their financial report and their 10K and their quarterly reports and the things that the CEO says. Does the CEO even say pricing is important? I remember a CEO of Snap-on saying, "Yeah, we have to give discounts on our hottest selling item. And we're going to make another whole plant to make more of this item so we can give more discounts and sell more of it." I'm like,
Make it
dude,
up in volume.
yeah, come on, dude, man. Have you heard of raising your price? Anyway,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he got a one because he was oblivious to how to manage price in the first place, and he had no pricing team. Now I looked through this, and I'm looking for the pricing team. Now, if it's a global company with global operations, you need global pricing people because the commercial arrangements you have in Brazil are different from the commercial arrangements you have in the US or the UK or Japan. Very different commercial places. The other thing to look for is titles. What level of responsibility do you have? Now, if you have nothing more than analysts and managers, you know that they do not have decision-making capacity. That means that their ability to actually contribute to the company doesn't exist. I want to see a vice president. I'm satisfied sometimes seeing directors because companies have stupid rules about how many people you have to manage before you're a VP. But I want to see a vice president because I need the pricing person to go toe to toe with the accountants, with the salespeople and the marketing people as an equal, not as a subordinate taking orders, but as an equal, explaining to them, here's the economics of the situation. This is what you should be doing, and actually have authority to get it executed. So I look at where they are. I look at what titles they're doing, what they're responsible for, which they often put in their little descriptions of their job or something like that. And I also look at counts, just plain raw number of counts.
Okay.
And the basic rule is, I said this many years ago, and then your big strategy consultant firms copied me, but you need to have about 1 per 100 million in revenue as a high end, 1 per 500 million in revenue at a low end. And the difference is going to be described by the complexity of the business. More complex, more dynamic, you need more pricing people, plain and simple.
Gotcha. Tim, unfortunately, we're up against our first break. And folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. You can check out our Patreon channel where you can become a member and get access to our bonus content. You can do that at patreon.com/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsor.
And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise with Tim Smith, and we're talking pricing spineometers, spineometers. Tim, just a couple more questions on that. One, how do you pick which company you spineometer?
I have a list of the Fortune 500 companies.
Okay.
And I know very clearly there's only 500 Fortune 500 companies. I'll just go through the list and pick them if they're in the right kind of industry. I wiped out about 100 of them just because they were inappropriate for me to review.
Right, right. Has anybody reached out to you from these companies after you've talked to them about their pricing? Have they connected?
The short answer is almost a no.
Okay,
Not
that's all right.
once. But what I have seen is when I give somebody a good grade, the HR department then touts it and says, "Look at how great we are." And when I gave somebody like a middling grade, the next year they hired new people and made them vice president of pricing.
Oh, okay.
And when I gave a company a low grade, about 2 years later, they went bankrupt. So I have one piece of evidence that pricing is useful in at least keeping the going concern going. Okay, so
maybe you should create a mutual fund, a Tim Smith mutual fund index for these Fortune 500 companies, and see, this is the 4-star mix, the 2-star mix. Because one of the things, I guess, if they are at that 1 and 2, they have opportunity for improvement, and if they do improve, it could be significant, right?
If there are 1 or 2, they got huge opportunity to improvement. But 1 implies, I hate to say this, it implies the CEO has no interest in it. There's a feeling among Wall Street and among many executives that price is simply a function of supply and demand. It's the economics. It's the detailed information. I don't need to worry about it. The market will take care of that. And if that's how they feel, they're not going to invest in actually learning how to manage price better. They just figure it's a market function. That's a 1. When they become like a 2, it means the CEO knows it's important, but at the 2 and 3, they know it's important. They just haven't made the right investment there. Okay. By the time they get a 4 or 5, a 4 means they made a lot of investments, but I found a few holes that I'm pretty sure they can fit. A 5 means I think things look all right, but I don't work there, so I don't really know. And there's one other reason why I'm using Fortune 500 companies. I mean, I'm gray. I've been at this for 20 years. Do you know how many times a Fortune 500 company has asked for my services?
0.
0. So guess what? If I made them angry, do you think I care? Because they did not care about me before, so now, now they care about me at least. And that's fine.
That's awesome. So
you were talking. There has been 1 or 2 Fortune 500 companies that used me.
Okay.
So. They're off limits as far as I'm concerned.
There you go. Well, that makes sense. But when you were talking with Ron about where people sit in the pricing and how many should people have, you alluded to it, but didn't address it directly. Where do you think pricing it best sits? Is it under the CMO? Is it under marketing? Is it under the finance people? It is under sales, or is it his own separate C-suite, CPO? I mean, where do you think it best sits? And maybe that's industry dependent too.
It's definitely industry dependent. Rather than answering the question directly, what I want is that pricing person to have a direct line to the CEO, because they're out there trying to accomplish what the CEO says they want to accomplish in the market. Okay, so they need to have that communication line. Now, I will try to answer your question to some degree, though. When you look at some of the pricing, it's very mathematical. If you have a marketing department that's focused on communications and branding, they don't have a lot of time for that kind of mathematical insight. Maybe they don't even know how to do the math. So putting pricing underneath people who can't handle the math is not a good idea. That's why I often see pricing under finance. When I say pricing not under finance, it is usually under marketing. I'm okay with that. And that's because the marketing team is strong enough to actually be okay with that kind of math. I'm good with that. I really like it when I see pricing underneath the strategy group, okay, or something of that nature. Because what pricing requires is I have to work with commercial, I have to work with finance or accounting, and if I'm doing certain kinds of pricing, I got to work with legal, because this is, this can really put the company under strain under certain situations.
What about with, I mean, you say you haven't worked with the Fortune 500, smaller companies, say in that, let's call it mid-market. Are you seeing someplace where pricing better sits as its own? I think what I'm hearing you say is it's most important wherever it sits that it has some autonomy and influence, and it's not just a calculation function.
That's exactly what I want. And I don't like it when I find, I'm going to name some names, like Black & Decker just took their pricing department and scattered it among all their parts. Well, then how in the world do you share knowledge of best practices as a pricing function when you work for 10 different business units? It's not a good idea to me. So that's why I want to see pricing as a function with a career path where people can go forward and develop expertise and then share it back to the business and help move the business forward.
Yeah. So you had a great line about dynamic pricing and Taylor Swift, and then you kind of poo-pooed it a little bit that it doesn't work. Why do you say that?
Oh, two different things. One was yield management, which
okay. You were going so fast. I think my brain skipped a beat there. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
But when I'm just trying to match supply and demand, what they actually found is that they'll raise the prices of for the Uber. But that doesn't actually increase the supply of Uber drivers. It just makes money for the Uber drivers.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The supply of Uber drivers is highly inelastic. Is what they found. That's what I was referring to.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then to that end, and this is maybe we make the transition in the fourth segment, because I know Ron wants to talk about some other things, talk about Rawls. We mentioned John Rawls's, but dynamic pricing is under a lot of pressure, I think, from its fairness aspect. So a lot of people don't perceive it as, quote, fair. So let's talk about that, and how does that relate to this notion that Rawls talks about, which is really about his theory of justice.
Yeah, fairness is always in the mind of the beholder. I kind of have a hard time talking about fairness at all because people say it's unfair. Well, what if you're on the other side of the transaction? Do you consider it fair? And what's fair is culturally relevant. So like in the United States, I can't do price fixing. And Saudi Arabia, I'm totally encouraged to do price fixing. So it's like, what are the rules you want to go by? And if you're going by the rules, that's as good as you can do. What people think is or is not fair, well, they make that up. So justice is more, well, it's just as problematic. Because the first thing you have to ask is, how do you define just? What is the meaning of justice itself? And I have been reading Amartya Sen, an economist who became a philosopher out there in India. He's still alive. And then after that, I picked up a book by John Rawls. I was reading through some other books, and I thought that they were just stupid. I had a wrong theory. And I thought that their discussion of what was just simply totally biased and made no sense across the globe. So instead of me getting more and more angry at them for writing such stupid ideas, I decided to read the theory of justice. Okay, well, what does the philosopher say the actual meaning of justice is? And his theory of justice says, let's define a just society using the idea of the veil of ignorance. You do not know who you will become in your society that you are trying to design, but you would like for it to be designed in a just way. Now, this is very different from like Plato, and I'm just going to, Plato was smart, good guy. Recall that he also thought that there should be no no fiction, no horror stories, no. He thought you should banish people or kill them because they
You thought
did
slavery was okay.
well, slavery was okay, and he thought that the world should be run by a dictator who is smarter than everybody else. And I'm like, that doesn't work, man. If you, he was okay with genocide. He was okay with genetically modifying humans to make us into a better state and deciding who and who cannot reproduce.
Right.
This guy is just no. Okay. So let's move beyond Plato 2,000 years ago into the theory of justice, John Rawls, 1980s, 1970s. Behind that veil of justice, I want to define the society. And one of the rules he came up with is something is just if it leaves the worst off better off.
Right.
As long as I'm leaving the worst off in society better off, I will call that a just act.
All right. Well, we will pick this up on perhaps the other side, but we want to remind our listeners they can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. Of course, the website is The Soul of Enterprise, where you can see show notes as well as previews to upcoming shows. We'd love for you to become a Patreon member, patreon.com/TSOE. You can listen there to our episodes without commercial interruption, as well as our bonus episodes. And lastly, just a reminder to go out and rate this podcast. And you can do this by going to ratethispodcast.com/TSOE. We do read all of the reviews on the air. Love to hear from you. But right now, a word from our sponsors.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here with our second interview with Tim Smith. And Tim, we were talking about inflation during the break, and I think we've had about 2 generations now of pricers that haven't really had to deal with inflation very much, at least in the US. What have you been seeing with this and advising your clients to do in inflationary times?
Well, yes. Maybe Americans haven't seen inflation, but if you're a global corporation, you've been dealing with inflation in one place or the other. You can take the best practices from how you handled Argentina or Turkey or maybe Venezuela. I can't believe Black & Decker still sells to Venezuela. But anyway, because they don't sell to Bolivia right next to them. And I'm like, Bolivia needs screwdrivers. Anyway, you can take your best practices that you already have from other countries and apply them back to wherever you live. And this is the need for building a pricing community within a corporation rather than saying, well, you can't talk to each other and you're not really a function. You are a function. And you can build on those best practices. The next part is that you got to change the frequency at which you change prices. This idea of the annual price review, and then we'll handle discounts from there or rebates from there, that makes no sense when inflation is no longer 2%. When you start looking at 10%, 20% inflation, and you're thinking about these numbers, they sound horrible. It's like, wait, remember, Argentina lived with 40% inflation for like a decade until it hit 400 in 1 year. It was the election year. Imagine that. Somebody printed money during the election year. Never heard of that. Turkey did the same. So you got to learn how to adjust your prices on a more frequent cadence. And I've heard people build war rooms around this. Okay, that works. But you're going to have to raise your prices when your input costs are going up. And you're also going to get to raise your prices when your competitors are raising their prices. So this requires heavy attention to the competitors, heavy attention to your cost, heavy attention to the value you're adding, and making sure that you're keeping your cadence of pricing changes aligned with the market dynamics. Here's where, again, you're going from 1 per 500 million in revenue up to 1 per 100 million in revenue. And I've even seen companies go beyond that to like 1 per 50 million in revenue.
And I'm also curious, I mean, the CPI that's promoted in the, or talked about in the mainstream media, that's kind of an average. I mean, don't you need to get a little bit more granular about your specific costs rather than just relying on what's being reported in the media?
This is exactly the issue behind index-based pricing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example of an index-based price by Waste Management. And I did code something for them, but that was 2 decades ago. So this is like me explaining how they might be using it.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm contracting with Waste Management to pick up a city's garbage, like Jackson just set out a contract with Richards, okay? That contract is lasting 4 to 6 years. And I'm being asked to give a price tag on that offering 6 years from now. I can't buy futures. Futures only go for 2 years. And my input costs may not be covered by futures, right? So what I do instead, and Waste Management does this with about 60% of their residential garbage collection contracts. What I can do is then say, okay, I'm going to tie my price to the CPI adjusted for the CMS wage index. That's a Medicaid wage index for that particular location. Because there's labor required, and I don't know the cost of labor in 6 years. And I'm going to tie my price to the price of fuel, because I don't know how much fuel I'm going to, cost in 5 years from now. But I know it today, so I'll tell you today's price, and I'll tell you how it will mechanically change in a transparent manner 6 years from now, and you'll know exactly why it was. You're still getting the best price. It's just the whole structure of pricing has changed, so I have to change my price. And then you think about, what else do you need? You need trucks, right? So I'll take that truck index and add that percent change in the truck index. And Fred, Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, will provide me with an index of the cost of heavy-duty trucks. It's not exactly a garbage truck, but it's pretty darn close. I can use that. So now I've kind of hedged with the contract for my customer for a 10-year contract on how I'm going to manage prices. And then I add on something, my value add price. How much value am I adding by managing all of these things and delivering something to you securely, so you know I'll be there in 10 years, still there to serve you. So I got a value add price. Now I got 3 indices I got to manage plus a value add price, and I'm managing my price mechanically, automatically over the course of time in an algorithmic approach.
Right. With specific information that's relevant to your industry rather than just using the average.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that can work if you're doing a 6-year contract. And Lennar Homes buy homes over the course of a 5-year contract to build out a new residential area. So you can see them doing it with gypsum. You can see them doing it with plumbing fixtures, all sorts of things. That will work in those industries. It doesn't make sense if I'm selling froyo or oatmeal. And take about Quaker Oats, Pepsi, they're still thinking in the US of annual price changes, right? Well, maybe they need to start thinking in terms of monthly price changes. And this is, again, why you need more pricing people and pricing infrastructure, software as a role too, so that these people can actually get the job done and make sure that business is strong and solid 2 years from now as it is today.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I wanted to get your answer to this too, because a recent book came out that said this: pricing should inform and determine corporate strategy rather than to serve it. Now, you said to Ed that you think pricing can be under the strategy group. Tim, does pricing follow strategy or does it lead it? What do you think?
It does both. It does both. Okay. When working with a medical equipment supplier, like making, let's say, giant machines to scan inside your body. Got the idea?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Forgot their name temporarily. They're the strategy of how I'm going to make the machine. Am I going to go for, in the US, am I going to go for the ASCs, or am I going to go for the community hospitals? I'm going to go for the major hospitals. That'll give me a different price point. And if ASCs tend to be the cheapest people out there, I'm sorry, doctors, but you're cheap. And that's fine. Then let's strip out a lot of value add and not make the best darn CT machine in the world. If I'm going for hospitals, major hospitals, let's add more stuff, put in more software, right? And put in more value. Now, this is pricing, working with marketing and product managers to help define how that value is going to be set up in the first place, so I can sell a product, and that will move the company forward. One of the problems I see often in medical tech is they try to make the best thing in the world because that's what they know how to do, but the ASCs want the cheapest thing. And so you have a disconnect of what you're making and what the market wants.
Right, right. Yeah, that's interesting. So you don't think it's either or, you think it's both.
Yeah, it's definitely both. Definitely both.
Yeah.
And like you have a startup company that actually says we're going to have market share and we're going to go for it. And if they got the financial backing, so I'm spending somebody else's money called the financiers to just grab market share with the expectation of raising the price in the future. And the finance says, cool, let's do it. Well, do it. But if I work as a bootstrap entrepreneur, yes, I do. No, I got to make money every single time, right? So it's a different approach to the market, different strategies, different ways of going forward. When they're just taking orders, though, that's a failure.
Right, right. Tim, we work in the accounting space a lot, and there's a huge move in private equity. And I know this question may be from left field, but we see a lot of private equity coming in and buying or investing in some of the top 100 accounting firms. Have you had any experience with private equity, and what do you think about it?
I have had some experience with private equity. They're usually very intelligent people with very strong emotions about what should or should not be done. That was politically nice, wasn't it?
It was. Now I want to hear the truth. Okay. Okay, well, we'll get that on the break, Tim. This has been awesome. And folks, would like to remind you, if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. And now we want to hear from our sponsors, including Woodard.
And we are back with our last segment with Tim Smith. And Tim, I just wanted to just jump back quickly to the Rawls stuff. And we were talking about fairness. And I want to lay this past you because this is how I have thought about it. And I wanted to get your reaction to this. But my dad was a Latin teacher. So as a result, I'm really big into etymologies and understanding the origin of words. And one of the things that I find interesting is that the word fair does not have a Romance language equivalent. Like if you try to translate the word fair into French, it'll be juste, it'll be just, right? But as you said earlier, justice and fairness are two wholly different concepts. And if you translate just back to English, it will never translate it as fair. Right. So that because it's a totally different thing. And I think that you really nailed it when you said that the notion of fairness, because like the opposite of fair is what? Foul. Right. We would never say, well, that's a foul price. Right. That we wouldn't think about that because it is more subjective. So I'm just wondering if, and I think this is Greg Lakoff and others talk about the importance of words, that the origin of not having a word to describe the concept of fairness is perhaps a challenge for those that they don't understand what it really means.
Yeah, that is a challenge.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's just no there's no worldview that understands the concept of fairness being different from justice.
Well, I see them as very different. Different.
Agreed.
Because you take a look at one of the things that I saw companies do in response to inflation is they started adding in a bunch of surcharges, fuel surcharge, ticket surcharge, printing surcharge, blah, 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 right? All these things. So people say, well, this is unfair. I'm like, well, you don't have to use them, And one of the, I'm going to just push for a bit. I get to teach economics at DePaul University sometimes. And I love teaching freshmen because I'm trying to help them see how the world works better. And I do see the role of economics as a job to improve the human condition or reduce human misery. That's how I define it. Most economists says reduce waste. Well, why am I reducing waste? Because I want to make us better off what we got, kind of a thing. And we go on and talking about, is communism good or bad? I still use those words.
Answer no.
Is capitalism good or bad, etc.? And I live in the city. There's bumper stickers all over their place that says, capitalism is corrupt slavery of the poor, etc. I live in the real world, okay? And I know that my students come from the real world too, so they've heard these things. And I bring out the theory of John Rawls teaching it because he talks about transactions. He talks about the need to leave the worst off better off. Under a free market society that's properly regulated, there's a role for government. Anybody who enters into a transaction is doing so because it leaves them better off. So by definition, a properly run, regulated, reducing market failures, capitalist society is more just than any other system we have. And the prices I'm extracting for customers in a free market society, not mandated by the price of the government, is a fair price. By definition, it's a just price because it's the price I'm willing to, I require to provide my services. And you, if you buy me, you're willing to pay it. So we're good.
Tim, when you gave that answer, there was a hint of Milton Friedman in your voice. Even vocally, it came across a little Milton Friedman-esque right there.
Well, I do talk about Milton Friedman a bit in my class. There's pendulum swinging, and I'm kind of glad because I want proper regulation. I want to be clear on this. Milton Friedman said the only purpose of a company is to produce profits. That's his job. And he has like this. No, that is the very definition of a corporate psychopath. The psychopath who's out there to do nothing but make myself better. And I don't care if I kill my employees. I don't care if I kill my customers. I just want to make myself better. I might as well be a fentanyl dealer. Get it? You have a problem with that purely free market viewpoint. And that's where you saw the rise of the other concept of corporations, and it has ebbed and waned. Waned and waxed? Ebbed and flowed? I don't know.
One of those.
Back in the 1950s, we were saying that the purpose of the corporation was to serve the shareholders, the community it works in, the employees that work for them, and their customers, okay? So they put out and this was a common mantra across companies. In the 80s, after Milton Friedman, it was something but make money for the shareholders. The shareholders are all that matter. Well, they're not. If y'all want to have a corporation help society move forward, there's regulation, and I do have to worry about, am I helping my employees grow? Am I helping my customers actually have a better life? How am I serving my broader community? Those things have to come in mind too. And don't call me woke. No, I'm just
but I would say, has it been proven that taking care of your employees, taking care of making sure you're servicing the customer, it leads to better profit? The way that I think about it is, you're right. The purpose of a corporation is not to make money. The purpose of a corporation is to serve the customer. If it does it well, it makes a profit. So the profit is the result, not the purpose. And I think the intermingling of those two things is the problem. Is that people think that purpose and result are the same thing, and they're not.
They are not. They are not. And I agree with you 100%. That is the marketing viewpoint of the company. The company exists to serve a customer need. Plain and simple.
Yep. All right. We have about a couple minutes left. I want to. We joked at the break that we're going to ask you about OpenAI pricing. I'm not going to ask you about OpenAI's pricing, but I am going to ask you about AI in pricing. What are you starting to see with AI and with regard to AI and pricing?
First of all, if you've been doing pricing for more than 2 months, you've been doing it for the past 20 years, AI. I mean, what do you
Perfect.
think of multivariate regression analysis, trying to figure out what the guardrails are, how to give this customer that price on that product on this day, and changing? And that is pure. That is the basis of AI. We just have a cooler term for it now. Now, I hated the term AI when it first came out. I want to just call it what it is: statistics. but I accept that I've lost that marketing fight heavily, so we use it. And that's one area where AI, by the way, I'm coming out with a product for medium-sized businesses, like, $50 million businesses, that applies AI. We're going to use the term. I'm helping them get the better prices. It's called Signy.
It applies statistics. That's great. I mean, as the father of a freshman who is a statistics major, it does my heart good to hear you say that. But I wholly agree that notion. I will say this though: wouldn't it not have been interesting if Sam Altman had used OpenAI to come up with his price? I don't think he would have come up with the $200 that as you said earlier during the break, he pulled out of his butt, because I think he should have just used ChatGPT. It would have done a lot of better job.
There's a woman down in Colombia who gave a talk at a recent PPS conference, and she was actually using ChatGPT to help define the questions and reasonableness of different prices to start as a hypothesis. So if she's going to do pricing research on some product, she'll go to AI, ask about the product for that market, for that situation, come up with a hypothesis, and says, okay, Mr. Customer who's paying me to do studies, I think this is a good hypothesis. Let's go test it with an actual study to see if that hypothesis is true. Because I read my student papers written by ChatGPT. They're bad.
Well, and I also have encouraged both my kids. My daughter is a sophomore in college. Is in high school. Use AI, but if you copy and paste it, you're an idiot.
Yeah. And ChatGPT really can't answer certain economic questions. If you ask ChatGPT, is rent control good? It will defend it. Mm-hmm. And like 98% of economists across the planet will say that is a stupid idea.
Yep, that minimum wage, etc., all of that stuff. But anyway, yeah. Tim, this has, as always, been great. Really great to talk to you. Really appreciate you coming on the Soul of Enterprise today. Ron, what do we got coming up?
Next week, Ed, we're going to talk to Alanis Hamali about the city Prospera, which I'm really looking forward to.
Excellent. Well, I'll see you in 167 hours.
All right. This has been the Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard. Building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us next week, folks, on Friday at noon Pacific time. In the meantime, check us out at soulofenterprise.com. We'll have more information on Tim, where you can find his books. And if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@verasage.com. Thanks for listening, folks. Have a great weekend.